They waited until I had paid the bill at Copper and Pine before telling me I wasn't their real daughter. My father said the words casually, like he was commenting on the weather, while my mother just stared at her wine glass. For 33 years, I thought I was paying for love with my obedience. It wasn't until I opened the old storage bins the next morning that I realized I had actually been paying their mortgage. The silence in my apartment was usually the thing I bought with my paycheck. It was a high-quality silence, insulated by double-paned windows and the solid reassurance of a rent payment made 3 days early. I lived in Briar Glen, Pennsylvania, a town that sat right on the edge of being upscale while still clinging to its blue-collar roots. My apartment complex was one of the newer ones, the kind with beige carpets and a gym that smelled like lemon disinfectant. It wasn't exciting, but it was mine. I was 33 years old, and I had spent every single one of those years trying to be the person who didn't cause problems. I worked as an operations manager for a mid-sized medical supply distributor just off the interstate. It was a job that required obsession with detail. I tracked inventory, managed logistics, and ensured that boxes of sterile gloves and surgical tubing arrived exactly where they were supposed to be. Exactly when they were supposed to be there. I was good at it because I liked systems. I liked things that had a beginning, a middle, and an end. I liked numbers because they didn't lie to you, and they didn't change the rules halfway through the game. My personal finances were the same. I kept a spreadsheet that tracked every cent I earned. I knew how much I spent on coffee, how much went to my 401k, and exactly how much sat in my emergency fund. That fund was my security blanket. Growing up in the Kelly household meant living with a permanent, low-level vibration of panic. There was always a bill that was pink, or a phone call that my mother, Denise, wouldn't answer, or a car that mysteriously disappeared from the driveway because it was being serviced for 3 weeks. I had learned early that money was oxygen. Without it, the family suffocated. When my phone buzzed on a Tuesday afternoon, I felt that familiar tightening in my chest before I even looked at the screen. It was my mother. "We are doing a family dinner tonight." The text read, "To celebrate Lauren, Copper and Pine, 7 o'clock, be there." There was no question mark. It wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. My younger sister, Lauren, had just opened a boutique in the trendy part of downtown. It was called L. Kelly Studio, and it sold beige linen dresses and artisanal candles that cost $40 a pop. I had no idea how she had funded it. When I asked, I got vague answers about investors and determination. I typed back, "I'll be there." I arrived at Copper and Pine 15 minutes early. It was my default setting. If I was early, I could control the environment. I could secure a table that wasn't near the kitchen. I could check the prices on the menu so I wouldn't be shocked. And I could prepare myself mentally for the performance. The restaurant was warm, smelling of wood smoke and expensive roasted meats. It was the kind of place my parents loved because it projected success. Mark and Denise Kelly were people who believed that if you looked wealthy, the actual money would eventually catch up to you. It never did, but they never stopped trying. I stood by the hostess stand, smoothing the front of my black trousers. I was dressed for work. Practical and sharp. I saw my reflection in the glass of the wine cellar door. I looked tired. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and my posture was rigid. I looked like the person you hired to fire people. When my family arrived, they swept in like a weather front. Lauren was in the lead, glowing. She was wearing a cream-colored sweater that looked cashmere and impossibly soft. Her hair in loose, perfect waves. She looked like the main character. Behind her came my parents. Mark, my father, was wearing a blazer that was slightly too tight across the shoulders, his face flushed with the artificial high of a celebration he couldn't afford. Denise was in a floral dress, her lipstick a shade too bright, her eyes scanning the room to see who was watching them. Anna Lauren squealed, rushing forward to hug me. She smelled like vanilla and expensive perfume. "You made it." I hugged her back, feeling the delicate bones of her shoulders. "Of course," I said. "I wouldn't miss it. Congratulations on the opening." We were seated at a round table near the center of the room. The noise level was high. a clamor of laughter and clinking silverware. Immediately, the dynamic shifted into the groove we had worn down over 3 decades. I became the audience, the witness, the stabilizer. Lauren was the star. My parents were the proud managers. I ordered a club soda. Mark ordered a bottle of red wine without looking at the price list. So, Mark started, pouring the wine with a flourish that threatened to splash the white tablecloth. The big day. The boutique is officially the talk of the town. I saw 3 people walking out with bags just this afternoon. Lauren beamed, tearing a piece of crusty bread. It's been crazy. I mean, the foot traffic is amazing. I think we're going to crush our first quarter projections. I nodded, genuinely trying to be happy for her. That is great. Lauren, did you get the inventory software sorted out? I know you were worried about tracking the consignment items. Mark waved his hand dismissively. Oh, stop with the boring stuff. Anna, let her enjoy the moment. Always with the logistics. I felt the small sting. Familiar as a paper cut. I'm just asking. Inventory is important if you want to be profitable. Denise took a sip of wine, leaving a red crescent on the glass. Anna, honey, not everything has to be a spreadsheet. Lauren is an artist. She's creating an experience. It's different from what you do. I kept my face neutral. And what is it that I do? Mom. You know, Denise said, waving a hand vaguely. Boxes, warehouses. It's very solid, very reliable. But Lauren has always had that spark, that vision. They laughed. A light, bubbling sound that excluded me. The implication was clear. I was the sturdy, uninspired draft horse, and Lauren was the show pony. I was useful. She was exceptional. The waiter arrived to take our orders. I ordered the roasted chicken, the second least expensive thing on the entree list. Mark ordered the ribeye steak. Denise ordered the scallops. Lauren ordered a pasta dish with truffles. As the dinner went on, the slights began to stack up. They were small, almost invisible to an outsider, but I felt each one. When I mentioned that I was up for a promotion at the distribution center, Mark talked over me to point out a local councilman sitting 3 tables away when I tried to talk about the housing market in Briar Glen. Denise sighed and said I worried too much about equity. You're so different from us. Anna, Mark said, leaning back in his chair, his face slightly shiny from the wine and the heat of the room. He said it with a laugh, but his eyes were hard. We're dreamers. We take bites out of life. You're always checking the expiration date on the milk. Lauren giggled. Dad? That's mean. It's true, though. Denise chimed in. She reached over and patted my hand. Her palm damp. We love you for it. Anna, someone has to be the designated driver of the family. I pulled my hand away, pretending to reach for my napkin. I wasn't the designated driver. I was the mechanic who kept the engine running when they blew the gasket. The check came at the end of the meal, placed discreetly on a small black tray in the center of the table. The conversation stopped. The air at the table changed instantly. The warmth evaporated, replaced by the sharp metallic tang of expectation. Mark made a show of patting his pockets. Frowning, he looked at the bill, then looked at me. His smile was tight. A challenge. Well, he said, his voice booming slightly, loud enough for the tables nearby to hear. Real family takes care of family. He didn't reach for his wallet. He just looked at me. Denise looked at her plate. Lauren started playing with her phone, scrolling through Instagram, absenting herself from the reality of the moment. It's a big night for Lauren, Mark continued, the pressure in his voice rising. And since you're doing so well at the warehouse place, with your promotions and your saving, it would be a nice gesture, a gift to your sister. I looked at the bill. It was $340. It wasn't a fortune, but it wasn't small. It was my grocery budget for the month. Dad, I said, keeping my voice low, I paid for the anniversary dinner last month, and I bought the supplies for Lauren's launch party. Mark's face darkened. The jovial father act flickered. Don't be cheap. Anna, it's unbecoming. Your sister just launched a business. We're supporting her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and ask why supporting her meant emptying my wallet. But I looked around the restaurant. I saw the councilman eating his steak. I saw the neighbors. I saw the way Denise was hunching her shoulders, waiting for me to make a scene so she could play the victim. I couldn't do it. The shame was a physical weight in my gut, a heavy stone I had swallowed years ago. "Fine," I said. I pulled out my card and placed it on the tray. Mark smiled. Satisfied. He had won. He had exerted his dominance, and I had submitted. "Thank you." "Anna," Lauren said without looking up from her phone, "you're the best." We walked out into the cool Pennsylvania night. The air smelled of wet asphalt and pine needles. I just wanted to get to my car, to the silence, to the safety of my apartment. I wanted to go home and recalculate my spreadsheet to account for the $300 I had just lost. I was unlocking my sedan when Denise appeared at my elbow. She moved quietly, like a shadow. "Anna, wait," she said. I stiffened, my hand gripping the door handle. "What is it?" "Mom, I'm tired. I have work early." She wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself. "It's just, well, your father didn't want to bring it up at dinner. He didn't want to ruin the mood." My stomach dropped. There was always an after-dinner act. The dinner was just the admission price. "What is it?" I asked again, my voice flat. "We have this property tax notice," she said, her eyes shifting away from mine. "It's overdue. And the electric bill, it's a little high this month because of the heating. We just need a temporary loan, just to get us over the hump until Mark's commission check clears." I closed my eyes. I knew about Mark's commission checks. They were mythical creatures. They were always coming, but they never arrived. "How much?" I asked. $2,000, she whispered. I spun around to face her. $2,000, Mom. Are you kidding me? I just paid for dinner. I paid your car insurance last month. I can't just drop $2,000. It's a loan. "Anna," she hissed, looking around to see if anyone was listening. "We will pay you back. We always do." "No, you don't." I said, "You never pay me back. I have a list. Mom, I have a spreadsheet of every loan you've taken in the last 5 years. It's over $15,000. Denise's face crumbled into a look of tragic martyrdom. "Why do you have to be so cold? We are your parents. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. I worked since I was 16. I said, my voice rising. "I bought my own clothes. I paid for my own community college. You guys were always drowning. I tried to help you budget. I sat down with you last year and showed you how to downsize. I told you to sell the truck. We need the truck." Mark's voice boomed from behind her. He had walked up while we were arguing, Lauren trailing behind him. He looked angry now, the wine turning sour in his system. "You think you're better than us?" Mark stepped into my personal space. He smelled of red wine and aggression. "Because you have a little savings account. You think you can tell us how to live." "I'm not trying to tell you how to live," I said, stepping back, my back hitting the cold metal of my car. "I'm telling you I can't keep funding it. I have my own life." "You have a life because we gave it to you," Mark shouted. A few people walking out of the restaurant stopped to look. Lauren looked mortified, shrinking back toward her car. "I suggested you sell the second car," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. "I suggested you cut back on the cable package. These are practical solutions. You're selfish," Denise spat out. "That's what you are. Selfish and hoarding money while your family struggles." "I'm not hoarding," I shouted back, snapping. "I'm surviving. I'm the only one in this family who lives in reality. That was the trigger." Mark's face turned a mottled purple. He jabbed a finger in my face. "You have no right to judge us," he roared. "No right. You walk around with your nose in the air, acting like you're the queen of Briar Glen. Well, let me tell you something." "Mark, don't," Denise said. But it was weak. It wasn't a command. It was a suggestion. "You're not even our real daughter," Mark blurted it out. The words hung in the air between us, suspended in the cold night vapor. They were loud. They echoed off the brick facade of the restaurant. The silence that followed was absolute. The traffic on the main road seemed to stop. The wind died down. I stared at him. I waited for the punchline. I waited for him to say he was joking, or that he meant I didn't act like them, but he didn't. He stood there, chest heaving, his eyes wild with the satisfaction of having thrown the ultimate grenade. I looked at Denise. She didn't look shocked. She didn't gasp. She just pressed her lips together into a thin white line and stared at my chin. She looked like she was holding her breath, waiting for the fallout. But she didn't deny it. She didn't say, "Mark, stop it. You're drunk." She stood there and let the words exist. I looked at Lauren. She was standing by the bumper of her SUV. She looked away. She looked at the pavement, then at the sky. She didn't look surprised. She looked uncomfortable. She looked like someone who had known a secret for a long time and was just embarrassed that it had been said out loud in a parking lot. That hurt more than the words themselves. The realization that I was the only one who didn't know. What I whispered, the word came out as a croak. Mark seemed to realize what he had done. The adrenaline drained out of him, leaving him looking deflated and old. He took a half step back. "You heard me," he muttered. But he wouldn't meet my eyes anymore. I looked at Denise. "Mom." She turned her head away. "Let's go." "Mark, everyone is looking." She grabbed his arm and pulled him toward their car. They didn't look back. Lauren hesitated for a second, looking at me with wide, panicked eyes, and then she scurried after them, getting into her car and slamming the door. I stood alone in the parking lot under the buzzing halogen light. My hands were trembling so hard I dropped my keys. I had to crouch down to pick them up, and for a moment, I thought I wasn't going to be able to stand up again. I felt hollowed out. I drove home on autopilot. I didn't remember the turns. I didn't remember the traffic lights. I just remembered the feeling of the steering wheel under my palms, the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly turned into liquid. I got into my apartment and locked the door. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on my couch in the dark, still wearing my coat. I replayed every memory I had, every childhood birthday, every Christmas. I looked for the cracks. I looked for the moments where they had treated me differently. And suddenly, it all flooded in. The way Mark would look at me with cool detachment while he tossed a ball with Lauren. The way Denise would forget to sign my permission slips but never Lauren's. The way I was always the responsible one, not because they trusted me, but because they didn't feel the need to nurture me. They had used my desire to belong as a leash. They knew I felt like an outsider, so they made me pay for my ticket in. They made me buy my seat at the table, over and over again, and tonight, when I refused to pay, they had simply revoked the ticket. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows of passing cars move across the plaster. By morning, the shock had hardened into something else. It was a cold, sharp clarity. I called my boss at 7 a.m. "I'm not coming in today." I said, "I'm taking a personal day." I didn't wait for a response. I hung up and walked to the closet in the hallway. I pulled down the plastic storage bins where I kept my old tax returns and documents. I had taken them from my parents' house years ago when I moved out, mostly to make sure they didn't lose them. I sat on the floor, surrounded by dust motes dancing in the morning sun. I dug through the papers, old report cards, a certificate for perfect attendance in the 4th grade, and then I found it, a manila folder near the bottom of the stack. It had my mother's handwriting on the tab. Anna Important. My heart hammered against my ribs. I opened it. Inside, it was a mess. It wasn't a neat file. It was a dumping ground. There was a photocopy of a birth certificate, but it looked wrong. It was a copy of a copy, grainy and faint. The state seal was barely visible. I held it up to the light. The bottom edge, where the signatures should be, was cut off by the photocopier. There was a vaccination record from when I was 2. The name on the top had been written over with whiteout and rewritten as Anna Kelly. And then, stuck to the back of a high school transcript, was a letter. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to Mark Kelly. It was from Briar Glen Community Bank. It was dated 3 weeks ago. I must have scooped it up by accident the last time I was at their house helping them organize their disastrous filing cabinet. I unfolded it. Final notice. Automatic draft returned. Account ending. In 4492, Reason insufficient funds. Please contact us immediately regarding the household pay enrollment linked to this account. I stared at the paper. I didn't recognize the account number. I didn't know what household pay was. But the date on the letter was the day before I had transferred $500 to my mother for groceries. I looked at the birth certificate again. I looked at the whiteout on the medical form. My parents had said I wasn't their real daughter. They had thrown it at me like a weapon to hurt me. But looking at these papers, I realized they hadn't just been hiding my history. They had been rewriting it. And if I wasn't their daughter, then who was I? And more importantly, whose money had been paying for this lie? I closed the folder. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, cold engine start up in my chest. It was the same feeling I got when I walked into the warehouse and saw a chaotic mess of inventory that needed to be sorted. I stood up. I wasn't going to beg them for answers. I wasn't going to ask them to take it back. I was going to audit them. I walked to the kitchen and made coffee, black. I drank it standing up, looking out the window at the parking lot. I watched a woman walk her dog. I watched a delivery truck pull in. They thought they had broken me. They thought that by cutting the string, I would collapse. But they forgot what I did for a living. I tracked things. I found the source of the error. I corrected the variance. I put the mug down on the counter with a definitive click. I waited 48 hours before I tried to speak to them again. I needed that time to let the tremors in my hands stop and to let the cold, hard logic of my profession take over the emotional wreckage in my chest. I treated the waiting period like a cooling-off clause in a contract. If I spoke too soon, I would scream. If I waited, I could interrogate. On Thursday evening, I drove to their house. I didn't call first. I knew that if I called, they would screen me, or worse, they would prepare a script. I wanted to catch them in the mundane reality of their lives, before they could put on the costumes of the misunderstood parents. The house looked the same as it always did. The siding was a pale blue that was starting to peel near the gutters, and the lawn was overgrown by exactly 3 days. It was a house that always looked like it was sighing under the weight of its own maintenance. Mark's truck was in the driveway. Next to the sedan I had paid to repair 6 months ago, I walked up the steps and knocked. I didn't use my key. I had a key, but using it felt like claiming a right I no longer had. Denise opened the door. She was wearing a bathrobe, though it was only 6 in the evening. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, making her look older, more fragile. When she saw me, her eyes widened, not with warmth, but with the specific alarm of a debtor seeing a collector. "Anna," she said. She didn't step back to let me in. "I need to talk to you. Mom, and Mark." She pulled the robe tighter. "Your father isn't in a good mood. Anna, he's been very hurt by what happened at the restaurant." I almost laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound in my throat. He is hurt. He told me I wasn't his daughter in front of a crowd of strangers. Denise flinched. "Oh, honey, please. He was drinking. You know how he gets when he feels disrespected. He just said it in anger. It was just heat of the moment stuff." I looked at her. I looked right into her pale gray eyes, searching for the denial. I waited for her to say, "Of course you are our daughter." He was lying. "Is it true?" I asked. She looked down at the welcome mat. "It's complicated, Anna. Families are complicated. Why do you have to be so rigid about everything? Can't we just move past it?" She wasn't saying no. The refusal to answer was an answer in itself. It was a loud, screaming confirmation. "I want to hear him say it," I said, pushing past her into the hallway. Mark was in the living room, sitting in his recliner, the television blaring a cable news channel. He didn't look up when I walked in. He stared at the screen, his jaw set in a stubborn line. "Mark," Denise said, her voice pleading. "Anna is here." "I'm not talking to her," Mark rumbled, keeping his eyes on the TV. "Not until she apologizes for the scene she caused. Embarrassing her sister like that. I caused a scene," I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts. "You disowned me over a dinner check." "I said I am not talking to her," Mark shouted, finally turning to look at me. His face was red, the veins in his neck bulging. "You want to act like a stranger? Fine. Get out of my house." I looked at him. I looked at the man whose temper I had tiptoed around for 3 decades. I looked at the man whose approval I had tried to buy with good grades, with silence, and eventually, with checks. And suddenly, I saw him not as a father, but as a bad investment, a sinking ship I had been bailing out with a teaspoon. Fine, I said, I'm leaving. But since I'm a stranger, I assume strangers don't pay your property taxes. Mark's eyes narrowed. Don't you threaten me. It's not a threat, I said, my voice dropping to a register I usually reserved for firing incompetent warehouse staff. It's a fact. I am done. I walked out. Denise called after me, her voice rising in a wail. Anna, you can't leave it like this. We need that money by Friday. I slammed the car door and drove away. I didn't look back. The backlash was immediate. By the time I got back to my apartment, my phone was buzzing with the rhythm of a panic attack. Text from Mom. You are breaking this family apart. Over money. I thought we raised you better. Voicemail from Mark. You ungrateful brat. After everything we did for you, you think you can just walk away. You owe us. And then, the social media strike. I opened Instagram and saw Lauren's post. It was a picture of her looking wistfully out the window of her boutique. A cup of tea in her hands. The caption read, Sad day today. It's hard when people you love forget where they came from. Success changes people. And not always for the better. Holding my real family close tonight, it had 40 likes. I stared at the screen. Real family. She was using the same language Mark had used. They were circling the wagons, and I was on the outside. I put the phone down on my kitchen counter. I felt a wave of nausea. But I pushed it down. I walked to my home office, a small desk in the corner of the living room, and opened my laptop. If they wanted to talk about owing, we were going to talk about owing. I opened my master spreadsheet. It was a file I had maintained since I was 22. Every column was a category: rent, utilities, car, insurance, savings. I scrolled to the savings column. For years, I had set up an automatic split in my paycheck. 5% of my net income went directly to a high-yield savings account I had opened years ago. Or at least, that was what I thought. I treated that money as invisible. I never touched it. I never even looked at the balance often because I wanted it to grow undisturbed. It was my break glass in case of emergency fund. I logged into my main banking portal. I looked for the external account link. It wasn't there. I frowned. I clicked through the transfer history. My main checking account showed the primary deposit, but the 5% split didn't show up as a transfer out of my checking. It was being deducted before the money hit my main account. It was a direct payroll split. I opened a new tab and logged into my company's payroll portal. I navigated to the direct deposit section. There were 2 accounts listed. Main checking 95% of net pay. Secondary account 5% of net pay. I looked at the secondary account details. The bank name was Briar Glen Community Bank. I froze. I didn't bank with Briar Glen Community Bank. My parents did. I stared at the last 4 digits of the account number, 8821. I didn't recognize it. I had never opened an account there. I sat back in my chair. The hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. How was this possible? I had set up my direct deposit 7 years ago when I started at the company. I remembered filling out the form. I remembered attaching a voided check for my main account. I closed my eyes and tried to visualize the paperwork. I remembered a second form, a form for a savings allocation. Denise had brought it to me. The memory surfaced, hazy and sharp at the same time. I was 26. I was visiting them for a weekend. Denise had been talking about how important it was to save for the future, how she wished she had done it better. She had handed me a form from my own company. She must have printed it off the website. Just sign this. Honey, she had said, I found this great high-interest account for young professionals. I can set it up for you so you don't have to worry about the paperwork. You're so busy with the new promotion. I had signed it. I had signed it because I was tired, because I trusted her, and because it was easier than arguing. I had assumed she was helping me open an account in my name. I looked at the screen again. 5% of my paycheck, every 2 weeks. For 7 years, I did the math in my head. It was thousands of dollars. Tens of thousands. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, watching the numbers on the screen burn into my retinas. Monday morning, I walked into the HR office at work. Brenda, the payroll administrator, looked up from her coffee with a smile that faltered when she saw my face. "Hi, Anna. Everything okay? You look intense. I need to see my original direct deposit authorization forms. Brenda, the ones from 7 years ago, and any updates that have been made since." Brenda blinked. "Oh, okay. That's archived. But I can pull the digital scans. Is there a problem with your check? I hope not." I said, "I just need to verify something." She clicked around her computer for a few minutes. "Here we go." She turned the monitor toward me. There were 2 PDFs. One was the standard form for my main checking account. The other was titled secondary_deposit_auth_2019. 2019, I asked. That wasn't 7 years ago. That was 4 years after I started. "Yeah. Looks like you submitted a change form," Brenda said, "to update the routing on the secondary account." I leaned in. "Open that one." She double-clicked. The PDF opened. It was a standard direct deposit change form. At the bottom was my signature. It was definitely my signature. The loop on the A was distinctive, but the ink looked heavy, like it had been pressed down hard. "Look at the routing number," I said, pointing to the string of digits. Brenda squinted. "What about it?" I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. I had written down the routing number for Briar Glen Community Bank from their public website. The routing number on the form matched the bank, but the account number. I looked closely at the scan. The account number was handwritten in the boxes. The handwriting was blocky, trying to be neutral, but the third digit, an 8, looked odd. The top loop was slightly smaller than the bottom loop. "Can you zoom in?" I asked. Brenda zoomed in. The pixelation revealed the truth. The 8 wasn't an 8. It was a 3 that had been closed with a different pen. The ink color was a fraction of a shade darker. Someone had altered the account number after I signed it. Or, more likely, I had signed a blank form that someone else had filled in later. And then they had tweaked a digit to reroute it when the original account didn't work. "Who is the account holder?" I asked. Brenda shook her head. "We don't see that. Anna. We just send the money to the routing and account number provided. As long as the bank accepts it, we assume it's yours." I stood up. "Thank you. Brenda, can you print that for me?" I left work at 2 o'clock. I used a half day of vacation. I drove straight to Briar Glen Community Bank. It was a small bank, the kind with a single security guard who looked like he was asleep and a pot of stale coffee in the lobby. I walked up to the teller window. "I need to speak to a manager." I said. The teller, a young girl with bright blue nails, looked at my expression and didn't argue. She pointed to a glass-walled office in the back. "Tessa Monroe." I knocked on the glass door. Tessa Monroe was a woman in her 50s with a sharp bob and glasses on a chain. She waved me in. "How can I help you?" "Ms. Kelly." I said, "Anna Kelly." She typed my name into her computer. "I don't see an account for an Anna Kelly. Are you looking to open one?" "No." I said, "I'm looking for an account that has been receiving my payroll deposits for the last 7 years. Account ending in 8821. Tessa stopped typing. Her face went still. She looked at the screen, then at me. "I can't discuss an account that isn't in your name, Ms. Kelly. Privacy laws. It's my money," I said, placing the payroll printout on her desk. "That is my signature on the authorization. That is my employer sending the funds. I want to know whose name is on that account." Tessa looked at the document. She picked it up and adjusted her glasses. She was silent for a long moment. "I can't give you the name," she said, her voice lower, "but I can tell you that this account is flagged." "Flagged for what?" "It's a pass-through account," she said. "It's linked to a household bill pay service. We see this sometimes with elderly clients or complex family trusts. Money comes in, and it is immediately dispersed to third-party vendors, utilities, mortgage servicers, credit card companies, household bill pay." I repeated. The phrase from the letter in the folder echoed in my mind. Household pay. Is it automated? I asked. Yes, Tessa said. It's set up to trigger payments based on incoming balance thresholds. I sat back. It wasn't just a savings account my parents were raiding, it was a plumbing system. They had plumbed my paycheck directly into their overhead. Can you tell me who authorized the bill pay service? I asked. Tessa hesitated. She looked at the desperation in my eyes, and something in her softened. She turned her screen slightly away, but she spoke clearly. The service was set up in person. The account holder provided a power of attorney document. Power of attorney. I felt the blood drain from my face. I never gave anyone power of attorney. Tessa looked down at her hands. If you believe there has been fraud, Ms. Kelly, you need to file a police report. Once we have a warrant, we can release the records. But what? She leaned forward. The power of attorney on file. It's dated from when you were 18. It's very old. It might have been something you signed before you understood what it was. 18. The year I went to college. The year Mark had made me sign a stack of papers for financial aid and insurance liability. Thank you. Tessa, I said. I stood up. I felt like I was walking on a swaying bridge. I left the bank and sat in my car. I didn't start the engine. I pulled out my phone and opened the calendar app. I started cross-referencing. I looked at the dates of the emergencies my parents had had over the last few years. November 2021. The furnace broke. Mark had called screaming that they were freezing. I had sent them $500. October 2021. My payroll split had been deposited on the 15th and the 30th. August 2022. Denise needed dental work. Urgent, she had said. July 2022. I had received a bonus. The 5% split had been larger than usual. The pattern emerged like a picture developing in a darkroom. The transfers into the hidden account were consistent, but the withdrawals from it, the emergencies, always happened right after the account balance would have hit a certain tier. They weren't just spending the money, they were waiting for it to accumulate, spending it on their regular bills, and then, when they ran out or wanted something extra, they manufactured a crisis to double dip. They were using my secret money to pay the boring bills, and then using guilt to get my conscious money for the extras. I needed professional eyes. I couldn't do this alone anymore. I drove to Redmont, the next town over. I met Megan Sharp at a dive bar called the Rusty Anchor. It was dark, quiet, and smelled of stale beer, perfect for looking at illicit documents. Megan was my oldest friend. We had survived high school together. She was now a paralegal at a serious firm, the kind that handled corporate litigation and messy divorces. She was sharp, cynical, and fiercely loyal. I slid the folder across the sticky table. Tell me what you see, I said. Megan took a sip of her gin and tonic and opened the folder. She adjusted the lamp on the table. She went through the papers silently. She picked up the birth certificate copy. She picked up the payroll auth form I had gotten from Brenda. Okay, Megan said, her voice low. This is messy. How messy? Criminal messy, she said. She pulled out the birth certificate. Look at this. Anna, this isn't a birth certificate. This is an amended birth record request form. See the header? It's been folded over so you can't see the top line. I peered at it. She was right. The faint crease line ran right through the state seal. Why would they have a request form, I asked. Because they wanted you to think there was a problem with your records without actually showing you a record. Megan said, it's a prop. It's theater. If they show you a real birth certificate, you see your name. If they show you this, you see a bureaucratic question mark. It keeps you unstable. She picked up the payroll form. And this, the altered digit. That's forgery. Straight up. If they changed a 3 to an 8 to divert funds, that's bank fraud. But here's the kicker. She tapped the signature line. You signed it. Anna, I know, I said, putting my head in my hands. I signed everything they put in front of me. That's their defense, Megan said grimly. They will say you authorized it. They will say the alteration was a correction you approved verbally. Unless you can prove intent to deceive, it's a he said, she said civil dispute. But the money, I said, It went to an account I don't control. Megan nodded. That's your leverage. Trace the money. If the money went to pay bills that have nothing to do with you, like, say, a mortgage on a house you don't own, or a business loan for a sister who isn't you, then you have a case for misappropriation, even with a power of attorney. A fiduciary has to act in your interest. Paying their own light bill isn't in your interest. She leaned back. Anna, this not our real daughter thing. When did they say it Tuesday? I said, Mark said it. Megan swirled the ice in her glass. It's not just an insult, Anna. It's a strategy. What do you mean? Think about it. If you are their daughter, they have a social contract with you, reciprocity, love. But if you're a ward or an obligation or a charity case, then they can justify taking the money. They can tell themselves they are just reimbursing themselves for the cost of raising a child that wasn't theirs. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. They're rewriting the narrative to soothe their conscience, Megan said. They are making you a stranger so they don't have to feel guilty about robbing you. I looked at the pile of papers. The lies were paper thin. Literally. But they had held for years because I had never thought to look. So what do? I asked. Megan smiled. A sharp, dangerous smile. We stop playing by family rules. We start playing by legal rules. You need a forensic accountant. I know a guy. He's expensive, but he's good. He can find where that money went. I nodded. Do it. I drove home late that night. The roads were empty. I thought about the text from Denise. You are breaking this family apart. She was right. I was breaking it apart. But I was realizing that the family was a calcified structure built around a hollow center, and I was the only thing holding it up. I walked into my apartment. I didn't turn on the lights. I stood in the hallway and looked at the digital thermostat. It was set to 68 degrees. I paid for that heat. I paid for the electricity running the display. I went to my computer. I drafted an email to HR. Subject: immediate cancellation of payroll split. Please cancel the secondary direct deposit allocation immediately. Revert 100% of funds to the primary account. Effective immediately. I hit send. Then I opened my banking app. I looked at the transfer history one last time. The next day was a Friday. Payday. For the first time in 7 years, the pipeline would be dry. I sat back in the dark and waited for the scream. It wouldn't be a scream of pain. It would be the scream of a parasite realizing the host had cut the vein. And when they screamed, I would be listening. Not with empathy, but with a recorder. The Saturday following the discovery of the payroll split was a gray, suffocating day. The sky over Briar Glen was a flat sheet of slate, threatening rain that wouldn't fall. Inside my apartment, the air felt just as heavy. I had spent the morning freezing my credit with the 3 major bureaus, a task that felt like locking the doors of a house that had already been looted. I sat at my kitchen table, a fresh pot of coffee cooling beside my laptop. I had pulled my full credit reports. I expected to find disasters, maxed out credit cards in my name, fraudulent loans, the wreckage of identity theft, but the reports were surprisingly clean. My score was still in the high 700s. There were no open accounts I didn't recognize, no credit cards with 5-figure balances opened in 2015. I felt a momentary wash of relief, followed immediately by confusion. If they weren't opening credit lines in my name, how were they leveraging me? Then I saw it. On the Experian report, under the section labeled Soft Inquiries, the kind that don't impact your score but show who is looking at you, there was a recurring name, Northbridge Family Resource Network. They had checked my file 4 times in the last 3 years. The most recent inquiry was 6 months ago. I stared at the name. Northbridge was a local nonprofit. I knew them vaguely. They advertised on the placemats at the local diner. They offered debt counseling, utility assistance, and financial mediation for low-income families. They were the people you went to when you were drowning and needed someone to help you negotiate with the water company so they wouldn't turn off the taps. Why was a debt relief agency looking at my credit report? I wasn't their client. I had never walked through their doors. I Googled their number. They were closed for the weekend. I spent the rest of the weekend in a state of suspended animation. I cleaned my apartment until it smelled of bleach and desperation. I organized my spice rack. I didn't call my parents. They didn't call me. Either. The silence from their end was louder than any screaming match. It was the silence of people who were regrouping, figuring out a new angle now that the easy money was gone. Monday morning, I called in late to work. I told my boss I had a dental emergency. It wasn't entirely a lie. Getting the truth out of my family felt like pulling teeth without Novocaine. I drove to the Northbridge office. It was located in a strip mall on the edge of town, sandwiched between a discount mattress store and a nail salon. The windows were covered in flyers for food drives and energy assistance programs. Inside, the waiting room was worn but clean. The carpet was a faded maroon, and there was a small play area for children with a plastic bin of battered toys. A receptionist sat behind a glass partition. She looked tired. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm here to speak to someone about an inquiry on my credit report." I said, "My name is Anna Kelly." She typed into her computer. "Do you have an appointment?" "No. But your organization has been accessing my financial data, and I want to know why." She frowned, clicking her mouse. Kelly. I don't see an open file for an Anna Kelly. Try the Kelly household." I said, "Mark and Denise Kelly." Her face cleared. "Oh, yes, the Kelly file. That is with Eli Warren. He is our senior counselor." She picked up a phone and whispered something. A moment later, a door opened, and a man stepped out. He was in his late 40s, wearing a corduroy jacket with patches on the elbows. He looked like a weary academic. "Ms. Kelly, I'm Eli. Come on back." His office was small and cluttered with stacks of manila folders. He gestured for me to sit in a folding chair. "I didn't think we had a meeting scheduled," Eli said, looking through a thick file on his desk. "Usually I meet with your mother." I felt a cold spike in my stomach. So she does come here. My mother doesn't know I'm here. I said, "I pulled out the printout of my credit report. I want to know why you are running credit checks on me. I never signed up for your services." Eli looked at the paper, then back at me. He adjusted his glasses. He didn't look malicious. He looked confused. "Ms. Kelly, you are listed as the primary support contact for the household." He said. He flipped open the file. "Here, on the intake forms from 3 years ago, and the renewal forms from last year." He turned the folder around. I leaned in. It was a standard intake form for Family Stabilization Services. Under Applicant, it listed Mark and Denise Kelly. Under Household Income, the numbers were fudged, inflated enough to look solvable, low enough to qualify for aid, and there, at the bottom of the page, Primary Support Contact / Guarantor for Negotiated Plans, Anna Kelly. There was an email address listed, akelly.support@gmail.com. There was a phone number. It wasn't mine. It was an old landline number I vaguely remembered my aunt having before she moved to Florida. And there was a signature, Anna Kelly. I stared at it. The letters were round and looping. The pen pressure was heavy, indenting the paper even in the photocopy. It was the way my mother wrote when she was trying to be neat. It was the same handwriting that was on the folder in my storage bin. "That is not my signature," I said quietly, "and that is not my email address." Eli went very still. He looked at the form, then at me. He looked at the signature again. He closed the file slowly. "Ms. Kelly," he said, his voice dropping to a gentle, practiced tone he probably used when telling people they were about to lose their homes. "This is an unfortunate situation, but it is not an uncommon one." "Uncommon?" I asked. "My parents forged my signature to a nonprofit." He sighed. "We see this often. Families who are struggling. They sometimes use the name of a stable relative, a child or a sibling who has good credit, to act as a silent anchor. A silent anchor." I repeated. The term made me feel like a heavy weight chained to a drowning ship. "When we negotiate with creditors, electric companies, medical billing departments, we can get better terms if we can show that there is a stable party involved in the household," Eli explained. "Someone with income who is committed to the repayment plan. It lowers the risk profile. Your parents likely used your name to get approval for extended payment plans on their debts." "Did I assume liability?" I asked. "If they default?" Do I owe the money? Technically, no, Eli said. This isn't a loan application. It's a counseling agreement. You aren't legally liable for their debt unless you signed a specific promissory note with the creditor. But what? But they have been using your profile to validate their stability, he said. They have been telling us, and by extension, the creditors, that you are backstopping them. It's why we run the soft inquiries, to confirm that the support contact is still employed and solvent. I felt a wave of nausea. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had stolen my reputation. They had used my hard work, my discipline, my clean record, as a costume to wear so they could pass as responsible people. Can I see the payment history, I asked? Eli hesitated. Technically, privacy rules. I cut him off. Eli, my name is on that paper. You just told me I am the support contact. That makes me a party to this file. Show me the history. He nodded once. He turned his screen toward me. It was a list of negotiated settlements, a $3,000 electric bill negotiated down to monthly installments, a property tax lien put on a forbearance plan. I looked at the dates of the payments. July 15th, October 1st, January 15th. I pulled out my phone. I opened my text history with my mother. I searched for keywords. Need. Help. Short. July 12th. Anna. Honey. The car broke down. We are just $200 short for the repair. Can you Venmo? I had sent $200. 3 days later, a $200 payment was made to the electric company via Northbridge's plan. September 28th. Dad's medication is so expensive this month. Could you spot us $150? I had sent $150. October 1st, $150 paid to the tax lien. The pattern was perfect. It was a machine. They weren't short for car repairs or medication. They had payment plans with hard deadlines, negotiated by this agency, based on the promise that I was backing them. And when the bill came due, they invented a crisis to extract the exact amount from me to cover it. They weren't struggling chaotically. They were struggling on a schedule. I stood up. I felt cold all over. I need a copy of this file. Eli. Specifically the intake forms with the forged signature and the payment schedule. I can't give you the whole file without their consent, Eli said apologetically, but I can give you the documents that bear your name. He printed them. The sound of the printer was a rhythmic grinding that matched the feeling in my jaw. I walked out of Northbridge with a sheaf of papers in my hand. The sun had finally broken through the clouds, but the light looked sickly and yellow. I sat in my car and called Megan. I need an audit trail. I said, I didn't say hello. Anna. What happened? I just left a debt counseling center. I said, they have been using me as a guarantor, but that's not the main thing. I need to know where the mail went. What mail? The bill pay service from the bank. The one linked to the hidden account. If they were using a service to pay these bills automatically, there had to be confirmations, statements, notices. I need to know where those physical letters were going. Megan was typing in the background. Okay, if it was a service like household pay, they are legally required to send physical notices of major account changes or insufficient funds. If you didn't get them, and they didn't go to your parents' house because you would have seen them when you visited, then they went somewhere else. How do we find out? We request a change of address history from the post office, Megan said. It's tricky. But since you are the named account holder on the bank account, even if it was fraudulent, you have the right to know where your correspondence was being sent. I can draft a request on legal letterhead. We will claim we are investigating mail fraud, which we are. Do it, I said. 2 days later. Megan called me at work. I got it. She said, we're Post Office Box 402 in Redmont. Redmont. I asked. That was 20 minutes away from Briar Glen. It was the town where Megan worked. It was a town my parents rarely visited, or so I thought. Who rented it? Denise Kelly. Megan said. It was opened 5 years ago. And Anna, it was closed 2 months ago. 2 months ago. Right around the time Lauren opened the boutique. The timing was a physical blow. They had closed the P.O. box right when Lauren's business launched. It was a cleanup operation. They thought they had crossed the finish line. They had secured the business loan, probably using the stable financials they had manufactured with my money, and now they didn't need the hidden pipeline anymore. Or maybe they just wanted to erase the evidence before Lauren became a public figure in town. "I'm going to Redmont," I said. I left work early again. I was burning through my leave, but I didn't care. I went to the Redmont post office. It was a small brick building with a mural of the founding fathers on the wall. I spoke to the clerk, a man named Gary, who looked like he had seen everything and was impressed by none of it. I showed him the documentation Megan had sent me, the legal request, the proof of identity. "I'm trying to trace some missing correspondence," I said. "It was sent to Box 402. Gary looked at the papers. "Box is closed, ma'am. Closed in November." "I know," I said. "I just need to confirm who the authorized users were." He tapped on his keyboard. "Rented to Denise Kelly. Only authorized user was Denise Kelly. No one else had a key." "Did she come in often?" I asked. Gary shrugged. "Once a week, usually. Fridays. Lady in big sunglasses, always in a hurry. Fridays. Payday. She drove 20 minutes to a different town to collect the evidence of her theft every Friday, while I was sitting at my desk entering data, thinking I was building a future. I walked out of the post office. I stood on the sidewalk, watching the cars drive by. Redmont was a nice town. It had a revitalized Main Street. And right there, 3 blocks down from the post office, was a gleaming storefront with gold lettering on the window. L. Kelly Studio. It was perfectly positioned. Denise could pick up the mail from the P.O. box and then drive 3 blocks to visit Lauren at her new shop. It was a convenient little loop of deceit. I started walking toward the boutique. It was 6 o'clock. The sign on the door said, "Open until 7. Through the large glass window, I could see the interior. It was beautiful. I had to admit, minimalist shelving, soft lighting, racks of clothes arranged by color gradient. Lauren was behind the counter, folding a scarf. She looked peaceful. She looked like someone who slept well at night. I pushed the door open. A little bell chimed. Lauren looked up. Her smile was practiced, professional. "Welcome to?" The smile died when she saw me. She froze, the scarf half folded in her hands. "Anna," she said. Her voice was tight. I walked to the counter. The store smelled of lavender and money. "Nice place," I said. Lauren swallowed. "What are you doing here?" Mark said. "You?" Mark said, "I'm dead to you." I finished. "Or that I'm a stranger?" Lauren flushed. "He didn't say you were dead. He's just upset. You really hurt them." "Anna, I hurt them." I repeated. I looked around the shop. I touched a stack of silk blouses, $80 each. "Did you know Mom had a P.O. box here in Redmont?" I asked. Lauren blinked. Her confusion looked genuine. "A P.O. box number. Why would she to hide the mail?" I said, "The mail from the bank account that was funneling my paycheck into their pockets. The mail that showed she was paying your bills with my money." Lauren stiffened. She slammed the scarf down on the counter. "Stop it. Anna, stop with the conspiracy theories. Mom and Dad helped me with the startup costs because they believe in me. Just because they didn't help you doesn't mean they stole from you. They didn't have the money to help you." "Lauren," I snapped. My voice echoed in the empty shop. "They have been broke for 20 years. They have been on payment plans with Northbridge for 3 years. The only liquid cash they had was what they siphoned from me." "You're jealous," Lauren hissed. "That's what this is. You've always been jealous. You sit in your little apartment with your little budget, and you judge everyone. You can't stand that I actually took a risk and built something." I stared at her. I saw the resentment in her eyes. It was old. It was deep. And then she said it. The slip. "You always acted like Mom and Dad's money was yours to question," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "Even when we were kids. Mom, can we afford this, Dad? Should we buy that? You were always hovering, like you were the parent and they were the children. It was suffocating. Anna, maybe they didn't tell you things because you made them feel small." The words hit me like a physical slap. "You always acted like Mom and Dad's money was yours to question." She didn't know. She truly didn't know it was my money. She thought I was just the annoying, miserly older sister who policed the family finances out of a sense of superiority. She thought the money was theirs, and that my constant anxiety about their spending was an intrusion, not a necessity, but the second part of what she said that was the key. You were always hovering, like you were the parent. The anger drained out of me, replaced by a sudden, vivid memory. I was 12 years old. We were at the kitchen table. The table was covered in bills. Mark was pacing the room, holding his head. Denise was crying softly. "Anna, honey," Denise had said, sliding a pen toward me. "Can you write the checks?" "My hands are shaking too much. Just copy the numbers from the bill. Put it in the envelope." I had felt so important, so grown up. I wrote the checks in my careful, 12-year-old cursive. I licked the stamps. I organized the piles. "You're such a good helper," Mark had said, stopping his pacing to squeeze my shoulder. "Our little accountant. What would we do without you?" They hadn't just asked for help. They had groomed me. They had trained me to take on the burden of their survival. They had taught me that love looked like solving their problems. And when I got too good at it, when I started asking why the problems never went away, they started hiding the problems. And then they started hiding the source of the solutions. They made me the parent so they could stay children. And then they resented me for being the adult they created. I looked at Lauren. She was glaring at me, waiting for a fight. "I'm not jealous." "Lauren," I said quietly, "I'm tired." I turned to leave. "Wait." Lauren called out. Her voice wavered. "What did you mean about the P.O. box? Ask Mom." I said without turning around. "Ask her why she closed it the week you opened this place. Ask her who paid for the lease on this building." I walked out into the cool evening air. The streetlights had flickered on. I sat in my car for a long time. I watched the lights in the boutique. I saw Lauren pick up her phone. She was making a call. I knew who she was calling. I put my car in gear. I wasn't going to chase a DNA test. I wasn't going to dig up my birth records to see if I was adopted or if Mark had had an affair. That was emotional drama. And they thrived on emotional drama. They could spin that. They could cry and claim they were protecting me, but they couldn't spin the math. Money leaves footprints. Money has a routing number. Money has timestamps. I had the Northbridge records. I had the P.O. box history. I had the payroll audit. I was going to hire Caleb Rios. Megan had told me about him. He was a forensic accountant who used to work for the IRS. He was the guy you called when you wanted to peel the skin off a lie and see the muscle underneath. I drove back to Briar Glen. I passed the exit from my parents' house. I didn't slow down. I was done being the daughter. I was done being the sister. I was the creditor, and I was coming to collect. Rios Ledger and Company was located on the second floor of a converted Victorian house in Redmont, right above a dentist's office. The waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic and old paper. Megan had vouched for Caleb Rios, calling him a financial bloodhound, and as soon as I met him, I understood the description. Caleb was a man of few words and sharp angles. He wore a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that looked like they did actual labor. Not just typing. He didn't offer me coffee. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He just pointed to the chair opposite his metal desk and extended a hand for the documents. I gave him everything: the Northbridge intake forms, the altered payroll authorization scan, the P.O. box history, and the bank letter I had found in the storage bin. He worked in silence for 20 minutes. The only sound was the scratching of his pen on a legal pad and the occasional hum of the dentist's drill from the floor below. Finally, he put the pen down and looked at me. His eyes were dark and unreadable. "You have a leak, Ms. Kelly," Caleb said. His voice was dry, matter of fact. "But it is not a drip. It is a sluice gate. Explain it to me." I said. Caleb turned his laptop around. He had created a flowchart based on the documents. "Here is your paycheck," he said, pointing to a blue box at the top. "Here is the split. 95% goes to you. 5% goes here." He pointed to a red box labeled Intermediate Hub. "This account at Briar Glen Community Bank isn't a standard savings account," Caleb explained. "It is a clearing account. It is set up with a sweep function." As soon as funds hit the balance threshold, likely $200 or $300, it automatically pushes payments out to a preset list of vendors. He tapped a list of names below the red box: County Water and Power, Briar Glen Municipal Tax Authority, Horizon Mortgage Servicing, State Farm Insurance. I stared at the screen. Those weren't my bills. It's a bill pay hub, Caleb said. They set it up so they never have to touch the money. It goes from your employer to this ghost account, and then instantly out to their creditors. It's clean, it's automated, and because the money never sits in the account for more than 24 hours, the balance always looks low if anyone casually checks it. I felt a cold numbness spreading through my limbs. So the help I gave them. I started, my voice sounding distant. The times I sent them money for car repairs or groceries. That was extra, Caleb said. That was on top of the base layer. You were paying their mortgage and their utilities every month, automatically, for years. And then, when they wanted discretionary income, they manufactured emergencies to get cash directly from you. I closed my eyes. I felt sick. It wasn't just theft. It was architecture. They had built a structure to harvest me. How did they set up the hub, I asked. How did they link the vendors? We found this, Caleb said. He slid a printout across the desk. It was an email. Megan had dug it out of a deep search of public data breaches, linking my name to various service sign-ups. Subject: Congratulations on enrolling in household pay. Date August 14, 2018. To admindeniesdesigns.net, I looked at the email address. Denise Designs. My mother had tried to start an interior design business years ago. It had lasted 6 months. I had forgotten she even had a website. The email was a confirmation of enrollment in a third-party bill management service. It listed the linked bank account, the one with the altered routing number, and the authorized user Anna Kelly via POA. Via POA, I whispered. Power of attorney. Megan, who was sitting in the corner taking notes, spoke up. I traced the domain. Anna. Denise kept paying for that domain name for 3 years after the business folded. She was using that email address solely for this. It kept the notifications away from your inbox and away from her main family email account. It was a silo. Caleb pulled another document from the stack. To set up household pay with a power of attorney, you need a notarized affidavit. He said, the system requires a physical upload of the document. We pulled the metadata from the service's old logs. Don't ask me how, and we found the notary stamp associated with the account creation. He pointed to a blurry stamp on the bottom of a page. Patricia H. Vance, Notary Public, Briar Glen, PA. I know that name. I said, Mrs. Vance. She used to run the town clerk's office. She retired a few years ago. She runs a shipping and packaging store now, Megan said, down on Main Street. Caleb leaned back. If she notarized a power of attorney usage 4 years ago, she had to verify the identity of the principal. That's you. But I wasn't there, I said. Then you need to go ask Mrs. Vance, who was, Caleb said. I left Caleb's office with a list of instructions. Freeze everything, change all passwords, enable 2-factor authentication on every digital footprint I possessed. But first, I went to the shipping store. It was a small, cluttered shop smelling of cardboard and packing tape. Patricia Vance was behind the counter, taping up a box for a customer. She was a bird-like woman with sharp eyes and hair dyed a stubborn shade of auburn. I waited until the customer left. Mrs. Vance, I asked. She looked up over her reading glasses. Yes. Can I help you ship something? Dear, I'm Anna Kelly. I said, Mark and Denise Kelly's daughter. Her face lit up with recognition. Oh, the Kellys. Yes, of course. I haven't seen you since you were, well, very little. You look so much like your father. I ignored the comparison. I need to ask you about a document you notarized a few years back. For my mother, it was for a bill pay service. Mrs. Vance frowned, thinking, oh, goodness, I notarized so many things. Denise? Yes, she was always very organized with her paperwork. I remember she came in with a whole binder once. She was setting up some kind of trust or management fund. Did I come in with her? I asked. Mrs. Vance squinted at me. She tilted her head. Well, yes, she said slowly. I believe so. I felt a surge of confusion. Mrs. Vance, I have never been in this store before today, and I haven't lived in Briar Glen for 7 years. Mrs. Vance looked uncomfortable. She started wiping the counter with a rag. Well, my memory isn't what it used to be. But I remember Denise brought her daughter in to sign the affidavit. What did she look like? I asked. The daughter, Mrs. Vance paused. She looked at me, really looked at me, studying my face. She was younger? Mrs. Vance said. A bit more. Flashy. She had very long hair, blonde highlights, chewing gum. I remember Mark was there too, standing by the door. He looked very angry that day, impatient. He kept checking his watch and saying, "Let's get this done." My blood ran cold. Long hair, blonde highlights. Lauren would have been 22 then. I was 29. We didn't look like twins, but we looked enough alike that a retired clerk who hadn't seen me in a decade might not question it, especially if my mother was there vouching for her. Did you check her ID? I asked. Mrs. Vance stiffened. Of course I check IDs. I always check. But if Denise handed you the ID and said, "This is Anna," and the girl just signed, Mrs. Vance stopped wiping the counter. Her face closed off. "Look, I did my job," she said sharply. "If you have a problem with your parents, take it up with them. Don't come in here harassing a small business owner." She turned her back to me and started arranging rolls of bubble wrap. I walked out. I didn't need her to confess. I had the picture. Mark standing guard at the door, Denise managing the paperwork, and someone likely Lauren, or perhaps a friend they coached, signing my name while I was sitting in my cubicle 40 miles away. I sat in my car and called Caleb. It was an impersonation. I said, "Document it." Caleb said instantly, "Write down exactly what the clerk said. Date, time, description of the conversation." Then he gave me the hard advice. "Anna, you need to go dark. Change your direct deposit at work today. Not tomorrow. Today. Route it to a new bank entirely, one they have no history with. Freeze your credit, put a password on your IRS file, and do not tell them you are doing it." Why, I asked. Because right now, they think the glitch with the money is a mistake, or a temporary tantrum on your part. Once they realize the pipeline is actually cut permanently, they will panic. And panic makes people dangerous. I did exactly what he said. I spent the afternoon building a fortress around my identity. I opened a new account at a national bank. I updated my payroll portal. I changed the passwords to my email, my social media, my healthcare portal. I locked every door I could find. I was just finishing up around 7 o'clock when my phone rang. The caller ID said, "Dad." I stared at the phone. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I let it ring 3 times. Then, I picked up. I needed to hear the tone. "Hello," I said. "Anna." "Thank God," Mark said. His voice was breathless. Panicked. "Listen, we have a situation." I didn't say anything. I just listened to his breathing. "The water heater," Mark said. "The pilot light went out and the whole thing is leaking. There is water all over the basement floor. It's going to ruin the foundation if we don't get a plumber out here tonight." It was a classic performance. High stakes, immediate urgency, physical danger to the family home. That sounds serious. I said. My voice was steady, colder than I felt. "It is serious," Mark shouted. "They want $400 for an emergency call-out, plus parts. I need you to transfer $500 just to be safe. I'll pay you back next week when my settlement clears." There was no settlement. There was never a settlement. I can't do that. "Mark." I said. "What?" The word cracked like a whip. I said I can't do that. I don't have $500 for you. Silence on the line. Then, a low, dangerous growl. "Don't lie to me. Anna, I know when you get paid. I know you have it sitting there. This is your childhood home. This is where we raised you. This is what family does. We help each other when the house is flooding." I closed my eyes. I pictured the flow chart Caleb had shown me, the red box, the blue box, the automated theft. I know about household pay. Dad, I said. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of a predator who hears a twig snap. I know about the account ending in 8821. I continued. I know about the notary. I know you had someone sign for me. Mark didn't deny it. He didn't ask what I was talking about. He skipped right to the offense. You think you're so smart, he spat. You think you're some big detective? You ungrateful little bitch. We did what we had to do to survive. You stole from me. I said, we raised you. Mark screamed. The sound distorted the speaker on my phone. We fed you, we clothed you. You owe us everything. You are nothing without us. I am the one paying the bills. I said, that makes me something. You are a stranger, Mark roared. I told you at the restaurant, and I will tell you again. You are not our daughter. You are a cold, heartless stranger. I wish we had never taken you in. Taken me in. The phrase caught in my brain. What do you mean? Taken me in. But the line went dead. He had hung up. I sat there, the phone warm in my hand. Taken me in. It was a slip, a crack in the facade. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged. A text message. It was from Denise. I am so sorry about your father. He is under so much pressure. He doesn't mean those terrible things. I didn't reply. Another ping. Anna, please. This has all gone too far. There are things you don't understand. Things we kept from you to protect you. I can't discuss it over the phone. Mark is too angry. And a third, meet me tomorrow. Just us. Lake Juniper Park. By the old boathouse. Please. I want to tell you the truth. About everything. Including where you came from. I looked at the message. Where you came from. It was the bait. They knew exactly where to hook me. They knew that the "not our real daughter" comment had been the nuclear option, and now they were offering to defuse it, but only if I came to the table. I called Caleb. She wants to meet. I said, she says she has the truth. Go, Caleb said, but do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. And record it. Pennsylvania is a two-party consent state for recording, so you have to be careful. But if you are in a public park, there is no expectation of privacy. Keep your phone in your pocket. Recording app running. I'll go, I said. The next morning was Saturday. The sky was a bruised purple, clearing to a hard, bright blue. Lake Juniper Park was neutral ground. It was where we used to go for picnics when I was a child, back before the money got tight and the anger took over. I arrived early. I parked my car near the exit, facing out. I checked the voice recorder app on my phone. It was running. I walked to the boathouse. It was an old wooden structure, peeling white paint, overlooking the gray water of the lake. Denise was already there. She was sitting on a bench, wrapped in a long beige coat. She looked small. When she saw me, she stood up. She took a step forward, her arms slightly open, as if to hug me. I stayed where I was, 6 feet away. Hi, Mom, I said. Anna, she said. Her voice was thick, watery. Thank you for coming. She looked tired. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She was holding a worn yellow envelope in her hands. She clutched it to her chest like a shield. I saw the way she looked at me. It was a look of carefully calibrated sorrow. It was the look she used when she needed an extension on a loan, or when she needed a neighbor to forgive a slight. I'm sorry, she said, and a single tear tracked down her cheek. It was a perfect tear. It didn't ruin her foundation. I'm sorry for how it came out. She continued, your father, he has a temper. You know that. He loves you, but he's proud. He said I wasn't his daughter. I said, and last night, he said you took me in. Denise nodded slowly. She sniffed, dabbing at her nose with a tissue. That's what I need to tell you, she said. It's a long story. Anna, it's a story about love and sacrifice and hard choices. She held out the envelope. But before we get to that, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, I need you to understand why we did what we did with the money. We were drowning. Anna, we were going to lose the house. We were going to lose everything. We just borrowed it. We intended to pay it back. You forged my signature. I said, you had someone impersonate me at a notary. We did it to save the family, Denise cried out, her voice cracking. Doesn't that matter? We kept the family together. She took a step closer. Please, Anna, just listen. I looked at her. I looked at the envelope. I looked at the tears that seemed to turn on and off like a faucet. And I realized with a heavy, sinking dread that I wasn't looking at a mother who was sorry. I was looking at an actress who was trying to salvage the final act of a play that had already gone off the rails. She didn't want forgiveness. She wanted compliance. Tell me the truth, I said, and start with the envelope. Denise took a deep breath. She opened the clasp. The wind coming off Lake Juniper was biting, cutting through my coat as I stood 6 feet away from the woman who had raised me. Denise held the yellow envelope against her chest, her knuckles white. She looked smaller than I remembered, or perhaps the distance between us just made her seem that way. You were 2 years old, Denise began, her voice trembling with a practiced sort of reverence. It was a bad winter. Your mother, she wasn't bad. Anna, she was just young, broken. She was a second cousin on my father's side. She got into trouble. Drugs, bad men, the usual story. I watched her face. I looked for the familiar tells, the tightening of the jaw, the flutter of the eyelids. But she was delivering this monologue with the conviction of a saint. She left you at a fire station in Philadelphia. Denise whispered, Can you imagine a little girl, wrapped in a blanket, just sitting there? Social services called us because my name was in her pocket. Mark didn't want to do it. We already had plans. We were trying for our own baby. But I looked at you, and I just knew. She paused for effect, waiting for me to melt, waiting for me to fall to my knees and thank her for the rescue. Mark never fully accepted it, she said, lowering her eyes. He tried, God knows he tried, but he always felt a distance. That is why he lashed out the other night. It's not hate, Anna, it's fear. He's afraid you will leave us like she did. He's afraid that the bad blood will come out. Bad blood. I repeated. My voice was flat. She nodded eagerly. That is why we were so strict with you. That is why we pushed you to be responsible. We wanted to save you from your genetics. We wanted to make sure you didn't end up like her. It was a masterclass in manipulation. In 5 minutes, she had reframed my entire life, my discipline, my anxiety, my obsession with order. It wasn't a reaction to their chaos. It was a symptom of my bad blood that they had heroically suppressed. Mark's cruelty wasn't abuse. It was the tragic struggle of a man trying to love a damaged goods child. I looked at the envelope. Is that the adoption paperwork? I asked. Denise hesitated. She clutched it tighter. It is the guardianship transfer. We never formally. The courts were so expensive, and we didn't want the state involved. We did it privately, to protect you. I stepped forward. I held out my hand. Let me see it. No, she said, pulling back. Not yet. I just wanted you to know. I wanted you to understand that we saved you. We gave you a life. Anna. And yes, maybe we borrowed some money along the way, but didn't we earn it? Didn't we earn a little help after everything we sacrificed? The transactional nature of it hit me like a physical blow. She had just laid out the invoice for my existence. Item 1, rescue from fire station. Item 2, room and board for 30 years. Total, due. Everything I had. I reached into my bag. I didn't pull out a tissue. I pulled out a file folder. I don't care about the fire station. Mom, I said. I used the word mom deliberately, watching her flinch. I care about the routing number. I opened the folder and held up the enlarged scan of the payroll authorization form. Who changed this? I asked. Denise looked at the paper. She didn't read it. She knew what it was. Her eyes darted to the left, toward the parking lot, as if looking for an exit. I don't know what that is, she said weakly. It is a forgery. I said, it is my signature, but it is not my handwriting on the account numbers. Someone changed a 3 to an 8, Someone routed 5% of my income into a hidden account for 7 years. Denise looked at me, her expression hardening. The sad, sacrificial mother vanished. In her place was the woman who balanced the checkbook at the kitchen table. The woman who could calculate the exact amount of guilt needed to extract a loan. "We did what we had to do," she snapped. The sudden shift in tone was jarring. "Who is we?" I pressed. "Did Mark do it? Did you—" "We did what was necessary to keep this family together," she hissed. "You have no idea what it cost to run that house. You have no idea the pressure we were under. You were living in your nice apartment with your salary, buying your fancy coffee. We were drowning. So you stole it." I said, "We didn't steal it. We used it. It's family money. It all goes into the same pot." She wasn't denying it. She was justifying it. She was admitting intent without admitting the crime. I flipped to the next page. I held up the printout of the P.O. Box registration in Redmont, and this I asked. "You rented a box in a town 20 minutes away to hide the bank statements. Was that to keep the family together too? Or was that to keep me from finding out I was paying the mortgage?" Denise's face changed. It wasn't shock. It was the look of a fox that realizes the trap has snapped shut. She looked cornered. She looked at the paper, then at me, calculating her next move. "You are being so petty," she said, her voice trembling with rage now. "You are counting pennies while we are talking about lives. I am talking about fraud. Denise," and then I played my final card. Caleb had found it late last night. It was the piece of the puzzle that made the whole picture hideous. I held up the loan approval document for L. Kelly Studio. It was a public filing Caleb had dug up. It listed Mark and Denise Kelly as guarantors for the business loan. "I know why you needed the cash flow," I said. "It wasn't just for groceries. It wasn't just for the electric bill." Denise went still. "You needed to show the bank a consistent monthly income to qualify for the loan for Lauren's shop." I said, "My 5%, that was the stabilizer. That was the recurring deposit that made your debt-to-income ratio look solvent enough to get the approval." I stepped closer. "I didn't just pay your bills. Mom, I funded the boutique. I am the reason Lauren has her dream. And you let her treat me like a jealous failure while she spent my money." Denise didn't speak. She stared at me with a mixture of fear and loathing. The mask was gone. She hated me. She hated me because I was the one holding the mirror. "It was for the family," she whispered. "Lauren, she has a gift. She needed a chance. You were already set. You were fine. You didn't need it." "I didn't need my own money," I asked. "You have a job. You have a pension. Lauren had nothing. We had to even the scales." I stared at her. To her, justice wasn't about ownership. It was about her personal definition of fairness. I was the sturdy draft horse. I didn't need extra oats. Lauren was the show pony. She needed the ribbons. So they took from me to give to her. And they called it parenting. I put the papers back in my bag. I zipped it up. The sound was loud in the quiet morning air. "I'm done," I said. "Anna, wait," Denise said, reaching out. Her hand hovered in the air. "We can fix this. We can work out a payment plan. Just don't go to the police. Please. Think of your sister. It would kill her business." I looked at her hand. It was shaking. "You should have thought of that before you changed the digit," I said. I turned and walked away. I left her standing by the boathouse, clutching her envelope of lies, looking small and gray against the water. I drove straight to Redmont. I didn't go to the police station. I went to the boutique. I knew Lauren would be there. It was Saturday morning. The prime shopping window. The shop was busy. There were 3 women browsing the racks. Lauren was behind the counter, laughing with a customer. She looked radiant. She was wearing a silk blouse that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. When the door chimed, she looked up. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second when she saw me. But she recovered. She was a professional. "I'll be right with you," she chirped. I walked to the counter. I waited. I stood there, silent and immovable as a stone, while she finished ringing up the customer. A woman in her 60s, looked at me nervously, sensing the tension radiating off me. Have a lovely day, Lauren said, handing over the bag. The customer scurried out. Lauren turned to me. Her smile dropped like a curtain falling. What are you doing here? She hissed. You're scaring the customers. I know about the loan. Lauren, I said. She froze. Her hand went to her necklace, twisting the gold chain. I don't know what you're talking about. The business loan. I said, the one Mom and Dad signed for. The one they qualified for because they were funneling $2,000 a month of my income into their account to fluff their assets. Lauren's face flushed a deep, ugly red. They helped me, she said defensively. That's what parents do. They helped you with stolen money. I said, it wasn't stolen, she snapped. Her voice rose, shrill and panicked. It was household money. Dad said he had an investment payout. Don't lie to me. Lauren, I saw the look in your eyes at the restaurant. I saw the way you looked at me when I asked about the P.O. box. You knew. Maybe you didn't know the mechanics. Maybe you didn't know about the altered routing number, but you knew they didn't have the money. You knew they were broke, and you knew I was the only one with a steady paycheck. Lauren slammed her hand on the counter. The display of bracelets jumped. So what? She shouted. So what if they use some of your money? You have so much. You just hoard it. You sit on it like a dragon. I actually did something with it. I built a business. I created something beautiful. She gestured around the shop. This place saved the family. Anna. We were falling apart. Dad was depressed. Mom was a wreck. This shop gave them something to be proud of. It gave us a future. And you want to tear it down because you're petty, because you're mad you didn't get invited to the party. I looked at her. I saw the entitlement burned into her like a brand. She truly believed that her happiness was a sufficient return on investment for my theft. I didn't want to be invited to the party, I said quietly. I just wanted to know I was paying for the balloons. Get out, Lauren said. Her eyes were wet with angry tears. Get out of my store. You are toxic. You destroy everything you touch. I'm not destroying it, I said. I'm just sending the bill. I walked out. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. A clean, hot rage that felt like fuel. I went back to Caleb's office. It was Saturday, but he had agreed to meet me. Megan was there too. They had coffee waiting. I sat down and told them everything. The conversation with Denise, the admission about the loan, the confrontation with Lauren. Caleb listened, tapping his pen on the desk. When I finished, he opened a file on his desk. It gets worse, he said. I didn't think it could get worse. I was wrong. We did a deep dive on your asset history. Caleb said, we looked for anything attached to your social security number prior to you turning 18. And he slid a document across the desk. It was an old court record. When you were 14, you were in a car accident. Caleb said, do you remember that? I nodded. I was in the back seat. A truck rear-ended us. I broke my collarbone. It healed. There was a settlement. Caleb said, the insurance company paid out. Because you were a minor, the money was placed in a custodial account under the Uniform Transfers to Minors Act. It was supposed to be held in trust until you turned 21. How much? I asked. $40,000. Caleb said. I gasped. $40,000. That would have paid for my college. That would have been a down payment on a house. I had taken student loans. I had worked 2 jobs. Where is it? I asked, though I already knew. Caleb showed me the transaction history. It was a long list of withdrawals. Management fees, he said, pointing to the line items. Reimbursement for care, living expenses. They drained it. Anna, by the time you turned 21, the balance was 0. They paid themselves to raise you using your own injury settlement. I felt the room spin. They didn't just steal my salary. They stole my injury. They stole my pain. And then the realization hit me. Harder than the money. They told me I was lucky. I whispered, my whole life. They told me I was lucky they took me in. Lucky they put a roof over my head. Lucky they tolerated me. I looked at Megan. She looked furious. Her jaw was set so hard, I thought she might crack a tooth. They made you pay for your own room and board, Megan said. And they made you feel grateful for the privilege. They stole the story. I said, It wasn't just the cash. They stole the narrative. They convinced me I was a burden so I wouldn't notice I was the benefactor. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the street below. I saw people walking, living normal lives where mothers didn't rob daughters and sisters didn't build castles on siblings' graves. I can sue them. Right? I asked. Megan nodded. Yes. We have enough now. The altered payroll form is fraud. The P.O. box proves concealment. The draining of the custodial account might be past the statute of limitations for criminal charges, but it establishes a pattern of fiduciary abuse for a civil suit. We can go after the house. We can go after the business assets. But I asked. I heard the hesitation in her voice. But it will go public. Megan said, it will be in the court records. The local paper will pick it up. Local business owner sued by sister for fraud. It will destroy Lauren's reputation. It will humiliate your parents. I thought about that. I thought about the shame. And then I thought about Mark screaming that I was a stranger. I thought about Denise standing by the lake, lying about protecting me. I don't want to destroy them. I said, I just want out. I want to be free. Then we sent a demand letter. Megan said, we offer them a settlement. They pay you back, or at least. They agree to a payment plan, and they sign a full admission of facts. In exchange, you agree not to file criminal charges. Draft it. I said, we spent the next 2 hours drafting the letter. It was brutal. It was precise. To Mark and Denise Kelly, re-unauthorized misappropriation of funds and fiduciary breach. Demand is hereby made for a full accounting of all funds diverted from the payroll of Anna Kelly to the account ending in 8821, as well as a full accounting of the custodial funds from the 2008 settlement. Total estimated principal $82,000. You have 48 hours to provide the original financial records and agree to a repayment schedule. Failure to comply will result in the immediate filing of a civil complaint and a referral to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation regarding bank fraud and forgery. I signed it. My hand didn't shake. We sent it via courier. We also sent a digital copy to Lauren, Mark, and Denise. I went home. I sat in my apartment and waited. I felt like a soldier in a trench, waiting for the whistle. I expected Mark to call and scream. I expected Denise to come banging on my door, but the silence stretched for hours. Then, at 8 o'clock that night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin, Sarah. Sarah lived 3 towns over. We weren't close, but we exchanged Christmas cards. Hey, Anna, are you okay? Uncle Mark just called my dad. He's calling a huge family meeting for tomorrow at your parents' house. He sounded really upset. Said something about you having a breakdown. I stared at the screen. A breakdown. They weren't going to pay. They weren't going to fold. They were going to put me on trial. They were calling in the extended family, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins. They were going to spin the narrative before I could file the papers. They were going to paint me as the unstable, jealous, adopted daughter who was attacking her loving parents in a fit of mental illness. They were going to use the bad blood story Denise had planted. I realized then that this wasn't just a legal battle. It was a war for the truth, and they planned to win it by drowning me in numbers. I called Caleb. They are calling a family meeting. I said, tomorrow. Don't go. Caleb said, it's a trap. I have to go. I said, why? Because if I don't go, they win the story. I said, they will tell everyone I'm crazy. They will tell everyone I'm a liar. And everyone will believe them because I'm the cold one, the quiet one, the one who never fit in. I'm going, I repeated, and I'm bringing the receipts. I spent the rest of the night preparing. I didn't sleep. I printed 3 copies of everything. I organized the evidence into binders. Binder 1, the payroll fraud. Binder 2, the Northbridge impersonation. Binder 3, the custodial theft. I put on my best suit. It was navy blue, sharp, armored. I pulled my hair back. I wasn't going to a family reunion. I was going to court. Sunday morning broke clear and cold. I drove to the house I had grown up in. The driveway was full. My Uncle Bob's truck was there. My Aunt Linda's minivan. Sarah's car. They were all there. The audience was seated. I grabbed the box of binders from the passenger seat. I took a deep breath. The air tasted of frost and dead leaves. I walked up the steps. I didn't knock. I opened the door. The living room was crowded. The chatter stopped the moment I stepped in. 12 faces turned toward me. They looked concerned, pitying, wary. Mark stood by the fireplace. He looked like a patriarch in a tragedy. He held a glass of water, his hand shaking slightly for effect. "Anna," he said, his voice deep and sorrowful. "We're glad you came. We just want to help you." I looked at him. I looked at Denise, who was sitting on the sofa dabbing her eyes. I looked at Lauren, who was staring at the floor. I walked to the center of the room. I dropped the box of binders on the coffee table. The thud was heavy, solid. "I'm not here for help, Mark," I said. "I'm here for the audit." The living room of my childhood home felt smaller than I remembered. It was crowded with furniture that had been bought on installment plans and people who had been bought with lies. The air was thick with the smell of brewing coffee and the stale, nervous heat of too many bodies in a closed space. I stood by the coffee table, my hand resting on the stack of 3 binders around me. The tribunal sat in a semicircle. To my left sat Uncle Bob and Aunt Linda. They were good people, simple people, who believed in the sanctity of blood and the commandment to honor thy father and mother. They looked at me with a mixture of pity and confusion, having been summoned here under the pretense of an intervention. To my right sat my cousins Sarah and her husband, Mike. They looked uncomfortable, checking their watches, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. And in the center, like royalty holding court, sat Mark and Denise. Lauren was perched on the arm of the sofa next to them, her legs crossed, looking like a wronged princess. Mark cleared his throat. It was a sound that used to make me freeze as a child, a rumble that signaled the weather was changing. "We are all here because we love you." "Anna," Mark began. His voice was deep, modulated for maximum gravitas. "We are worried about you. You have been acting erratic, distant, and now, these wild accusations." He gestured vaguely toward me, as if I were a stain on the carpet. "Your mother is heartbroken," Mark continued. "She tells me you threatened her, that you are talking about police, about suing your own flesh and blood." He paused, letting the words hang there for the audience. Aunt Linda let out a soft, sympathetic gasp. "We know you have been under a lot of stress at work," Mark said, his tone shifting to a patronizing soothe. "And we know it is hard for you. Seeing your sister succeed so quickly, jealousy can do terrible things to a person's mind. But we are a family. We don't air our dirty laundry. We don't attack each other." I looked at him. I looked at the performance. It was masterful. He had cast me as the unstable spinster, the bitter older sister who was lashing out because she was lonely and unfulfilled. I didn't interrupt him. I waited until he was finished. I waited until the silence stretched so thin it began to vibrate. "Are you done?" I asked. My voice was calm. It didn't shake. It sounded like the voice I used when I was presenting a variance report to the board of directors. Mark frowned. "Excuse me, I asked if you were done with the opening statement." I said, "Because I have a few corrections to the record." I picked up the first binder. It was black. I opened it with a snap that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "I am not having a breakdown, Mark. I am conducting an audit." I turned to Uncle Bob. Bob was a mechanic. He understood how things worked. He understood that if you put gas in a car and it didn't run, there was a leak. "Uncle Bob," I said, "you helped me fix my car last winter. You told me to always check the hoses, right?" Bob nodded slowly. "Yeah, Anna, that's right. I have been checking the hoses," I said, "and I found where the fuel was going." I pulled out the enlarged scan of the payroll authorization form. I held it up so everyone could see. 7 years ago, I signed a form authorizing a 5% deposit of my salary into a savings account. I said, "I trusted my mother to set it up." I pointed to the routing number. "This is the document my employer has on file. Look at the account number. Look at the 3rd digit." I walked over to Bob and Linda. I placed the paper in Bob's rough hands. "Is that an 8? Uncle Bob?" I asked. "Or is that a 3 that someone turned into an 8 with a ballpoint pen?" Bob squinted. He pulled his reading glasses from his shirt pocket. He looked at the paper. He looked at Mark. It looks like it was written over, Bob muttered. Mark stood up. This is ridiculous. She is showing you scribbles. She's paranoid. I didn't look at Mark. I walked back to the table and picked up the second document. This is a bank confirmation for an account ending in 8821. I said, that is the account where the money went. It is not my account. It is a hub account linked to a bill pay service called Household Pay. I pulled out the list of transactions. For 7 years, this account, funded entirely by my paycheck, has automatically paid the mortgage on this house. It has paid the electric bill. It has paid the car insurance for Mark's truck. I looked at Aunt Linda. Linda, you remember when Mark and Denise went to the beach 2 years ago? The year they said Mark got a big bonus? Linda nodded. Her eyes wide. There was no bonus. I said, I checked the dates. That trip was paid for by a withdrawal from the hub account. 3 days after my quarterly performance bonus hit. They didn't win the lottery. They skimmed the cream off my work. That is a lie. Denise cried out. She jumped up, her face blotchy. We paid for that trip with savings. Whose savings? I asked sharply. Which account? Mom. Because I have pulled your credit reports. I have pulled the public records. You haven't had a savings account with a balance over $500 since 2010. The room went deadly silent. People don't like to talk about money in polite company, but they love to hear about it when the facade cracks. I opened the second binder, the red one, but it wasn't just the money you stole. I said, it was my name. I held up the Northbridge Family Resource Network intake forms. This is a debt counseling service. I explained to the room. They do good work. They help families who are struggling. I pointed to the signature line. Mark and Denise applied for debt relief 3 years ago. They needed a guarantor, someone with good credit to anchor their application so they could get better repayment terms. I looked at Sarah. Sarah worked in a bank. Sarah, who is listed as the primary support contact, I asked. I handed her the paper. Sarah looked at it. She looked at me, then at Denise. It says Anna Kelly. Sarah whispered. Is that my signature? I asked. Sarah shook her head. No, that looks like Aunt Denise's handwriting. Denise sank back onto the sofa. She put her face in her hands. They impersonated me. I said, they used my credit score, my reputation, to clean up their mess, and when the bills came due, they manufactured emergencies, broken furnaces, medical scares to get me to send cash that exactly matched the payment plan installments. I turned to Mark. You called me ungrateful. Mark, you stood there and told this family that I was having a breakdown. But the truth is, I have been the head of this household for 7 years. I have been paying the bills you couldn't pay. I have been carrying the debt you couldn't carry. And you didn't even have the decency to ask. You just took it. Mark's face was a color I had never seen before. It was a dark, bruised purple. He looked like he was choking on his own rage. You have no right, he rasped. You have no right to come into my house and talk to me like this. It's not your house, I said coldly. It's the bank's house, and I'm the one paying the bank. I picked up the third binder, the blue one. This is the one that hurts the most, I said. My voice dropped. I wasn't shouting anymore. I felt a heavy, cold sadness settling in my chest. I opened it to the custodial account records. When I was 14, I was in a car accident. I said, I broke my collarbone. There was a settlement, $40,000. I saw Aunt Linda put her hand to her mouth. She remembered the accident. She had brought me soup. That money was put into a trust. I said, it was meant for my education. It was meant for my future. I held up the withdrawal history. It was gone by the time I was 21. I said, not on tuition, not on books, on household expenses, on administrative fees. I looked at Denise. She was weeping now, but they weren't the pretty, staged tears from the lake. These were ugly, gasping sobs. You told me I was lucky. I said to her, you told me I was lucky you took me in. You made me feel like a burden my whole life. But I wasn't a burden. Was I? I was an asset. I was a piggy bank. You could break open whenever you needed something. Denise looked up. Her eyes were wild. He wouldn't pay, she screamed. The sound tore through the room. Mark flinched as if he had been slapped. What I asked. Your father? Denise shrieked, pointing at Mark. He wouldn't pay for you. He said you weren't his. He said he wasn't going to spend his hard-earned money raising another man's mistake. Mark roared. Denise, shut up. I won't shut up. Denise stood up, trembling. I am tired of carrying it. Mark, I am tired of being the bad guy. She turned to me, her hands pleading. He refused to put you on the insurance. Anna, he refused to pay for your clothes. He said that if I wanted to keep you, I had to figure it out. He said, she is your baggage. You pay for the freight. The room was frozen. The air seemed to have been sucked out of the space, so I did what I had to do. Denise cried. I used the settlement money to buy your clothes and your food so he wouldn't yell at me. And later when things got tight, I used your payroll because I couldn't ask him for more money and I couldn't tell you the truth. She looked at me, her face twisting. I was protecting you. Anna, if you knew he looked at you and saw a bill he didn't want to pay, it would have destroyed you. So I let you think we were just poor. I let you think we were struggling together. I stared at her. The twisted logic was almost impressive. She had stolen from me to hide the fact that my stepfather, the man I called Dad, resented my existence so much he refused to pay for my cereal. You weren't protecting me, I said softly. You were protecting him. You were buying his silence with my money. And then Lauren stood up. She had been quiet, watching the destruction of her parents with wide, terrified eyes. But now, she saw the ship going down, and she scrambled for the lifeboat. I didn't know about the accident money. Lauren stammered. I didn't know about the settlement. That's terrible. She looked at the relatives, trying to distance herself. I had nothing to do with that. She said, I'm just finding this out now. Like you guys. I turned to her. I picked up the last document from the pile. It was the loan approval for L. Kelly Studio. Don't play innocent. Lauren, I said, you might not have known about the car accident settlement, but you knew about the boutique. I turned the document toward the room. This is the business loan that funded Lauren's shop. I said, $200,000. Lauren crossed her arms. So Mom and Dad co-signed. They believed in me. Unlike you, they co-signed. I agreed. But banks don't lend money to people with bad credit and no income. Mark hasn't had a steady commission check in 3 years. Denise has no income. I pointed to the assets and income section of the application. They qualified for this loan because they showed a monthly household income that included my diverted payroll deposits. I said, my money was the ballast. My money was the recurring revenue that convinced the bank they could service the debt. I looked at Lauren. I funded your dream. Lauren, I am the silent partner you hate so much. Every hanger, every shelf, every silk scarf in that store. I paid for the credit that bought them. Lauren's face crumbled. She looked at the paper, then at her parents. Is that true? She whispered. Did you use Anna's money to get the loan? Mark didn't answer. He was staring at the wall, his jaw working. Denise was sobbing into a cushion. You told me it was an investment, Lauren screamed at them. You told me you liquidated a retirement fund. There is no retirement fund, Lauren, I shouted back. Losing my cool for the first time. There is nothing. It's all smoke. It's all mirrors and theft, and shifting debt from one pile to another. The reality settled over the room. The relatives shifted in their seats. They looked at Mark and Denise not with the respect due to a patriarch and matriarch, but with the embarrassment one feels for a con artist who has been caught. Uncle Bob stood up. He put his coffee cup down on the table. I think I've heard enough, he said. His voice was heavy with disappointment. Mark turned to him. Bob, wait. You can't listen to her. She's twisting things. I'm looking at the papers. Mark, Bob said. He pointed to the payroll form. That's a forgery. That's a crime. You stole from your own girl. He shook his head. Come on. Linda, we're going. Bob and Linda walked out. They didn't look back. Sarah and Mike followed them, Sarah pausing only to give me a quick, terrified squeeze on the arm before fleeing the blast zone. The door closed. The house was quiet again. It was just the four of us. The nuclear family that had gone critical. I looked at Mark. He looked older than he had 10 minutes ago. He looked deflated. I walked over to the table and placed a single sheet of paper on top of the binders. "This is a legal notice," I said. "It is a revocation of all permissions. I have frozen my credit. I have moved my payroll. I have alerted the bank that the authorization was forged." Mark looked at me with pure venom. "You killed us," he whispered. "You just killed this family. The family was dead a long time ago." I said, "I'm just stopping the payments on the corpse." I pointed to the paper. "I am not suing you today," I said. "I am giving you a choice. You can sign a repayment agreement. Caleb, my accountant, has drawn it up. It garnishes Mark's future commissions and places a lien on the house until the principal of $82,000 is repaid. And if I don't sign," Mark sneered, "then I file the police report for the forgery." I said, "And Mrs. Vance, the notary, has already told me she remembers you bringing a blonde woman in to sign as me." I looked at Lauren. Lauren went pale. "If I file the report," I said, "they will investigate who impersonated me, and Lauren will be named as an accessory to fraud. Her business license will be revoked." Lauren gasped. She turned to Mark. "Dad, you said it was legal. You said you had power of attorney." Mark slammed his hand on the mantelpiece. "God damn it, sign the agreement." I said, "Or lose the daughter you actually like." Mark looked at Lauren. He looked at the fear in her eyes. He looked at the house he was about to lose. He snatched the pen from the table. He scribbled his name on the paper so hard the tip tore through the page. "There," he spat. "Are you happy? You got your blood money." "It's not blood money," I said, taking the paper. "It's my money." I put the paper in my bag. I picked up my binders. "Get out," Mark said. His voice was low, shaking with hate. "You are dead to us. Do you hear me? You are not my daughter. You never were. You are a stranger. I never want to see your face again." I looked at him. For the first time in my life, his anger didn't scare me. It didn't make me want to fix it. It just looked pathetic. A small man yelling at the inevitable. I looked at Denise. She wasn't yelling. She was watching me with wide, terrified eyes. She realized that the lie had been the only thing protecting her from the reality of her marriage, without me as the scapegoat. She was alone in that house with Mark's rage and their mountain of debt. "Goodbye, Mark," I said. I didn't say goodbye to Mom. I didn't say goodbye to Lauren. I walked out the front door. The air outside was crisp and clean. The sun was high in the sky. I walked to my car. My legs felt a little unsteady, like I had just stepped off a boat after a long, stormy voyage. I got into the driver's seat. I closed the door. The silence of the car was absolute. It was my silence. I put the key in the ignition, but I didn't turn it. I just sat there. I thought I would cry. I thought I would feel a crushing sense of loss. After all, I had just orphaned myself. I had just severed the only roots I had ever known. But as I sat there, looking at the house where I had spent 30 years trying to earn a place at the table, I realized something. I wasn't crying. I was breathing. For the first time in years, I was taking a full, deep breath without the tightness of anxiety in my chest. I looked at the passenger seat where the binders sat, the evidence of my worth, the proof that I wasn't the burden, I was the engine. I started the car. I backed out of the driveway. I saw the curtain move in the living room window. I saw Denise watching me go. I didn't wave. I put the car in drive and headed toward the highway. I had a lot of work to do. I had a new bank account to manage. I had a life to build. A life that belonged to me, paid for by me, and defined by me. I was no longer auditioning for the role of daughter. I had walked off the stage, and as I merged onto the interstate, watching the exit for Briar Glen disappear in my rearview mirror, I felt the strangest sensation. I felt rich. Not because of the money I would eventually get back, but because for the first time in my life, I didn't owe anyone a damn thing. Thank you so much for listening to Anna's story. It was a journey of betrayal, but ultimately, A journey of reclaiming self-worth. I hope you found it as powerful to experience as I did to write. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Where are you listening from? Have you ever had to deal with financial betrayal in a family? How would you have handled the final confrontation? Please don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice and drama. Share this story with anyone who needs a reminder that the truth always comes out in the end. Until next time.